My dad was the most stubborn old-school Chinese medicine practitioner in Chinatown. I helped out in his clinic for 10 years, yet he'd even burn the tattoo design sketches I hid in my drawer. "A waste of time!" he'd always roar. Until the day his clinic sign was stolen. Secretly, I designed a new one in the style of an acupuncture point tattoo. At the community art show, he stood silently before my work for a long time. That night, back home, he rolled up his sleeve, revealing his wrinkled arm. "Here, can you tattoo the Hegu point?" The scent of mugwort and aged wood hung thickly in the air of Chun's traditional Chinese medicine, a heavy, medicinal blanket smothering every corner of the clinic. This smell had long seeped into my bones, becoming part of my breath. The thin afternoon sunlight struggled through the dust, filmed street, front window, casting blurry patches on the clinic floor, barely illuminating the dust motes drifting in the air. My dad, Benjamin Chun, acknowledged as the most stubborn and skilled old-school TCM doctor in Chinatown, was bent over a man lying face down on the narrow treatment bed. His fingers, etched with the lines of time, pressed precisely on points along the spine with a steady, authoritative pressure. The patient let out a muffled groan, caught between pain and relief. "Strain. Cold invasion." Dad's voice wasn't loud, but it hit like a stone on wood, clear and sharp. "Stay put." Cupping to disperse the cold, he turned towards the gleaming copper sterilization cabinet. I, Mao Chun, almost reflexively stood up, reaching the heavy cabinet door before him. The cold metal handle felt numbingly familiar. Inside, glass cups of various sizes were neatly stacked, their inner walls reflecting a cold light. I deftly retrieved a few medium-sized cups and picked up the long tweezers, grabbing a wad of alcohol-soaked cotton. Dad paused only slightly, his gaze lingering on my efficient hands for less than half a second before returning to the patient's back, as if my presence were merely a well-functioning instrument in the clinic. 10 years. From a green high schooler to now, my youth had been ground away inch by inch, within these walls saturated with the bitter fragrance of herbs and the sighs of patience. My fingertips brushed the cool glass of the cups. Beneath them, hidden on the inner side of my left forearm, close to where the pulse throbbed, lay a small secret beneath the skin, a delicate tattoo of a swift bird, outlined in fine black ink. Now, it was securely covered by the clinic's drab, old shirt sleeve, along with the inconvenient longing for color and flight that resided in my heart. "Maya, fire!" Dad's voice snapped me out of my reverie. I lit the cotton ball. A ghostly blue flame leaped and danced at the tip of the tweezers, carrying a dangerous, fleeting vitality. Quickly, I plunged the flame into a cup, heating and expanding the air before swiftly withdrawing it, creating a faint hiss as the vacuum formed. The cup's mouth sealed firmly onto the tight muscle below the patient's shoulder blade. The skin puckered instantly under the powerful suction, turning a deep, mottled purple, red, like ripe fruit bitten hard. One cup, then another, landed precisely on key points along the meridian pathways. Soon, several dark red circles rose on the patient's back like ancient totemic marks. Dad narrowed his eyes with satisfaction, the deep wrinkles on his forehead relaxing slightly, as if the cups had sucked away not just the patient's cold dampness, but temporarily relieved the weight on his own heart. He straightened up, gently rubbing his own sore lower back. "All right, stay like that for 20 minutes, he instructed the patient, then turned towards his desk, picking up the polished purple clay teacup for a sip of strong, warm tea. His gaze habitually swept over my small desk against the wall piled with patient records waiting to be sorted, a few well-thumbed yellow Emperor's inner cannonet laces, a leaky ballpoint pen. Everything was orderly, meeting all his requirements for a proper TCM assistant. But his vision was sharp as a hawk's. It finally locked onto the half-open bottom drawer of my desk. A stubborn corner of brightly colored paper peeked out from the gap, jarringly out of place amidst the surrounding drab neutrals. Dad's brow furrowed instantly like two thick brushstrokes of ink. He set down the cup, strode over to my desk in a few angry steps, radiating offense. His calloused hand, accustomed to handling silver needles, ruthlessly yanked the drawer open. Inside, the design sketches I'd carefully treasured, my lifeline during late nights of exhaustion, my colorful dreams were laid bare in the clinic's murky light. Watercolor, lotus styles, mandalas entwined with geometric lines, nebula patterns created with fine stippling, they looked like a flock of vibrant butterflies that had strayed into forbidden's territory, fragile and frightened. "What is this?" Dad's roar cracked like thunder through the clinic's usual pain-filled quiet. The patient on the table jerked, making the glass cups on his back wobble. Dad ignored him completely, his bloodshot eyes fixed on the designs as if they were a deadly virus. He snatched the top few sheets covered in intricate modern patterns. The paper groaned under his rough fingers. "Dad, don't!" My heart leaped into my throat as I lunged to grab them back. 10 years. I knew exactly what came next. Every discovery ended the same way. "A waste of time!" The words, like branding irons dipped in fire, seared me with his utter disappointment and rage. He shook off my hand violently, the force sending me staggering. Without a glance at the lines and colors that held all my passion and inspiration, he crumpled the papers and stalked to the old metal bucket in the corner, used for burning moxa sticks and discarded herb dregs. The bucket's interior was thick with black soot, reeking of a mix of char and herbs. Dad pulled out his lighter. A sharp click, and the hungry blue flame licked at the colorful corner of the paper. The paper curled, blackened. Vibrant colors faded swiftly under the heat into hopeless ash. Orange flames leaped upwards, devouring the flowing lines, the carefully chosen hues. The flickering firelight danced on Dad's face, twisted with anger and deeply lined, and reflected in my own eyes, instantly gone cold. The air filled with the sickly, sweet, acrid smell of burning paper, brutally overpowering the mugwort's fragrance. I stood frozen, nails digging deep into my palms, leaving crescent-shaped white marks. My throat felt clogged with the hot ash, unable to utter a sound. Only the leaping flames left a burning imprint on my retinas. Again, countless repetitions over 10 years. The restless, color-craving thing in my blood was, in his eyes, always just a waste of time to be purified by fire. The flames in the bucket dwindled. The last sparks flickered defiantly before dying completely, leaving only a small pile of warm, gray-black paper ash, fragile as an insect's corpse. A deathly silence fell over the clinic, broken only by the patient's slightly heavier, nervous breathing. Dad stood with his back to me, shoulders rising and falling slightly, staring at the ashes as if they held the rebellious spirit that pained him to the core. He didn't turn around. His voice, strained with suppressed fury, grated out an order: "Clean this up. Then, go sort that new batch of poria in the storeroom." Wordlessly, I walked over, picked up the old broom and dustpan leaning against the wall. The cold metal handle sent a chill straight to my heart. Squatting, I swept the still, warm ashes, along with the last shred of hope from my heart, into the pan. The motions were mechanical, numb. The ashes were light, almost weightless, yet they pressed down on me, suffocating. As I dumped them into the huge black trash bin outside the clinic's back door, a stench of rotting vegetables and disinfectant hit me. I leaned against the cold brick wall and closed my eyes. The spot on my inner forearm where the swift bird rested pulsed with a faint, almost phantom sting. Clinic days flowed on like bitter herbal soup, slow, thick, and heavy with suppressed silence. Dad barely spoke to me except for necessary instructions, his eyes deliberately avoiding mine as if I were a contagion to be isolated. I still filled prescriptions, sterilized needles, logged patient files, applied cups, burned moxa precise as a programmed machine. Only late at night, when the clinic was utterly silent, filled only with the faint scent of dried plants from the medicine cabinets, would I retreat to my tiny room in the clinic's attic. Turning on the desk lamp, its orange, yellow halo illuminating a few design sketches miraculously spared from the flames, hidden deep in the drawer. The sound of pencil on sketchbook paper became my only moment of free breathing. My fingers tracing the lines were no longer transgression, but silent resistance. Occasionally, I'd unconsciously touch my inner forearm, where the swift rested, a reminder of wings not yet fully tamed. One evening, just after the last patient left, clutching the purple marks left by cupping, Dad was bent over, tidying the pulse, taking pillow. Mrs. Henderson from the neighboring grocery store, a plump, silver-haired woman who favored bright floral aprons, burst through the clinic door, bringing in a gust of cold air and the greasy smell of fried food from across the street. Dr. Chun, Dr. Chun. It's terrible, she gasped, her round face a mask of panic, her brightly painted lips trembling. Your sign. Oh my God, someone pried it off. Just now? What? Dad's head snapped up. The pulse pillow thudded onto the desk. Color drained instantly from his face. For the first time, his eyes used to diagnosing complex ailments reflected sheer, crumbling disbelief and shock. He practically stumbled out the door. My heart plummeted. I followed close behind. Neon signs flickered to life along Chinatown streets, casting shifting patterns on the damp asphalt. Outside the clinic, 7 or 8 familiar neighbors had gathered, murmuring and pointing. An air of uneasy voyeurism and pity hung heavy. Dad stood rigid in the doorway, head tilted back, staring fixedly at the space above the clinic door, where the sturdy, deep, red wooden sign bearing the bold characters Chun's traditional Chinese medicine had once hung. Only 4 bare, rusted iron brackets remained, jutting starkly into the gray, purple dusk like gums stripped of teeth. Shreds of violently torn wood clung to the bracket ends, white and splintered like broken bone. Who did this? Dad's voice was hoarse, shaky, emptied of strength. He scanned the neighbors, his gaze sweeping over familiar faces as if searching for an answer that didn't exist. Didn't see clearly, Dr. Chun. Mr. Wong from the noodle shop across the street shook his head, regretful. Just saw a beat-up van, whoosh past, didn't even stop, and the sign was gone. Must be those scumbags who steal old shop signs for scrap. Call the police? We must call the police. Mrs. Henderson waved her plump arms, indignant. Dad didn't respond. He just kept staring at the empty space, lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line, the muscles in his jaw clenched tight, twitching slightly. The last rays of sunset fell on his stooped back, turning his graying hair a desolate straw, like yellow. That sign wasn't just a piece of wood with writing. It bore the mark Grandpa had carved decades ago, the weathering of wind and rain, the proof of Chun's TCM, taking root on this street, the symbol of a lifetime's effort and dignity. Its loss felt like pulling the spine from the clinic, draining half his life force. He stood like a statue instantly eroded by time, radiating silent, crushing despair on the darkening street. Police came, asked routine questions, took notes. Dad answered mechanically, but his eyes remained vacant, looking past the officer's shoulder to that glaring void. Neighbors offered a few words of comfort and drifted away. Chinatown's nightlife buzzed to live food smells, neon flashes, tourist chatter, a thin veneer of gaiety over the raw wound above the clinic door. Dad silently turned and walked back inside. His hunched figure cast a long, heavy shadow in the doorway. The days that followed were even more stagnant, colder than before the sign was stolen. Dad seemed like a ghost of himself, sitting behind the desk, often staring blankly at empty patient cards. When patients came, he still treated them, his techniques precise, but the inner vitality, the steady confidence that was Chun's TCM, had noticeably dimmed. His sighs were heavier now, like stones dropped in the clinic's thick air. Occasionally, an old neighbor would pass by, glance up at the empty space, and poke their head in with cautious sympathy. Dr. Chun, the new sign. Not ready yet? Dad would mutter vaguely, quickly averting his gaze as if the bare lintel were a mark of shame branded on his face. He flipped through the yellow pages, called a few sign shops, but the quotes added new lines of worry to his wrinkled brow. Decades of reputation remained, but savings had long been drained by high rent and my waste of time university education. A proper traditional wooden sign was an unaffordable luxury. He paced the small clinic anxiously, fingers unconsciously twisting at his graying temples like an old beast trapped in a cage. That heavy, suffocating despair, like a rising tide, crept up my ankles, cold and sharp. I watched his face grow grayer, saw his brow furrow at the high quotes on the phone, caught the instant his eyes lost focus when he glanced at the empty lintel. An unprecedented impulse, mixed with 10 years of pent-up frustration, heartache, and defiance, churned in my chest. An idea sparked like a match struck in darkness, small but stubborn. Why not me? Late night. The clinic was silent. Downstairs, the scents of herbs mingled unseen in the dark. Faint city lights seeped through the attic window. I sat at my desk, switched on the lamp. An orange-yellow halo softly bathed the surface. I took a deep breath. The lingering scent of the day's moxa hung faintly in the air. I spread out a fresh, thick piece of cardstock. My fingers trembled slightly with nerves. The pencil tip touched the paper with a soft scratch, like silkworms eating mulberry leaves. This time, the lines weren't free, flowing release. Images flashed clearly in my mind. The faded meridian charts in the clinic, dense networks of blue lines, black dots marking countless points. The swirling, powerful branch patterns on Dad's polished purple clay cup. The pencil moved. Not flamboyant modern symbols, but the sturdy, reserved elegance of Eastern art. A simple circular outline took shape, symbolizing the endless flow of yin and yang. Inside the circle, slender yet resilient lines, like unseen rivers within the body, traced the paths of key meridians, the governing vessel standing tall like a backbone down the center, the conception vessel curving gently around it, the hand and foot yang ming channels stretching out symmetrically. At key meridian intersections, I carefully dotted precise ink marks for crucial points. Bai Hui, Dazui Hegu, Susanli, like stars in the night sky. Outside the circle, inspired by the cup's pattern, coiled vines with strong, vital lines, unfurled leaves spread, knots gnarled, symbolizing the healing power of herbs and nature. Space was left above the circle for the characters Chun's traditional Chinese medicine. I didn't use flashy computer fonts but tried to recall the brushstrokes of the Chun character Grandpa had carved on the old sign, sketching over and over to capture its decades-old strength. Under the lamp, pencil shadows layered on the paper. Lines grew from hesitant to confident and fluid. The meridian paths, point locations knowledge absorbed since childhood, almost instinctual, were no longer constraints but became the unique skeleton supporting my creation. When the last line representing the gallbladder meridian met the curve of the conception vessel, I put down the pencil and exhaled deeply. Looking at this design blending TCM essence with visual aesthetics in a tattoo style, a strange warm power quietly revived in my chilled fingertips. The fabrication was a whirlwind of secret excitement and profound anxiety. Using the half-day Dad was out visiting an elderly patient, I grabbed my design like a thief and slipped into the familiar tattoo studio on the corner. Ink Soul, Dave, the owner, a black man with arms covered in intricate ink and thick dreadlocks, was my only trusted accomplice. Whoa, Mia. Dave held my design, his eyes behind thick glasses usually carrying a hint of mockery widening instantly, filled with undisguised awe. This is fucking brilliant. Meridians? Acupuncture points? That idea is insane. Ancient yet cutting edge. He slammed the table excitedly, making the pigment pots rattle. Dave, I need it made into a sign, I whispered, explaining quickly. A real sign? To hang outside the clinic. Waterproof, weatherproof, and eye-catching enough. My voice held an unintended plea. Dave's excitement tempered. He rubbed the stubble on his chin, scrutinizing the drawing, his gaze turning serious. A sign? Interesting. A clinic sign in tattoo style? Maya, you're a damn genius. He grinned, showing white teeth. Leave it to me. Top, grade outdoor acrylic sheet, laser, engrave your beautiful lines, back painted color, coated with high strength UV, resistant varnish. Guaranteed tougher than those old wooden signs. And, he winked slyly, absolutely unique, gonna blind the whole damn Chinatown. The next few days were a race against time and Dad's rigid schedule. Dave needed time. I needed to ensure Dad didn't impulsively order an expensive traditional sign or discover any clues before the new sign was finished and secretly installed. I became quieter, more dutiful, even volunteering for extra clinic chores just to avoid attracting attention. Every ring of the phone made my heart leap. Every sigh Dad heaved looking at the empty lintel felt like a whip on my heart. The secret was a seed sprouting sharp thorns in my gut, making it harder to eat or sleep. Finally, exactly 2 weeks after the sign vanished, on a drizzly weekend dawn, Dave sent a coded message. Delivery complete, position perfect. Good luck, artist! Followed by a grinning emoji. Shot out of bed, my heart pounding like it wanted to escape my chest. I rushed to the narrow attic window and shoved it open. Cold, damp morning air rushed in. Holding my breath, I leaned out and looked down. A misty drizzle veiled the morning Chinatown in gray gauze. Right above the clinic door, on the space that had been an ugly scar for half a month, hung something new. It wasn't heavy, solid wood, but crafted from thick, clear acrylic. My design was perfectly laser, engraved and painted onto it. The simple circular outline, the slender, vital meridian lines inside, and the star, like points, stood out with striking clarity and modernity against the transparent material. Deep indigo outlined the meridians, the points were a rich ochre, and the symbolic herbal vines were a vibrant emerald green. The whole piece held the spirit of Eastern ink wash, yet carried the sharp lines and visual punch of contemporary tattoo art. Above it all, the characters Chun's traditional Chinese medicine weren't stiff print but had a hand, drawn strength, faintly echoing the old sign's Chun, yet more fluid and powerful. Fine raindrops gathered on the smooth acrylic surface, rolling slowly down the engraved grooves like tiny rivers, breathing life into the static lines. It hung there silently, like a giant talisman from the future, or an ancient scroll unfurling in the rain, announcing its arrival jarring yet strangely harmonious. I gasped, fingers digging into the cold window frame, nails nearly biting into the wood. It worked! It was really up there! Elation surged through me like electricity, instantly followed by crushing terror. Dad! We'll see it! What would he think? Rage? Seeing it as a deeper desecration of his life's work? Or, maybe just maybe, a flicker of recognition for the language of his own world woven into it? Called in anxious anticipation. I hid in the attic like a prisoner awaiting sentence, straining to hear every sound from the clinic below. Finally, familiar footsteps sounded on the stairs, slow, heavy, weighted with lingering exhaustion. Dad was coming down to open up. I held my breath. My heart hammered against my ribs, almost drowning out the gentle patter of rain outside. Seconds passed. Or maybe an eternity of dead silence. Then, crash! A tremendous bang, like something heavy hitting the floor, followed by the piercing shatter of porcelain. My blood froze over. He saw it. He's furious, smashing things. Panic seized me. My body reacted faster than my mind. I stumbled down the narrow, steep stairs, my heart pounding in my throat, choking me. Bursting into the clinic, the sight made me skid to a halt, rooted to the spot. Dad stood just inside the doorway, his back to me, hunched silhouette casting a deep black shadow in the frame. The door was wide open, letting in the damp, cool dawn light and air. On the floor, His treasured old purple clay teacup, used for over 20 years, lay in pieces. Dark tea stains spread amidst the pale shards. The liquid snaked towards a corner, but he seemed oblivious to the mess at his feet. He stood rigid, head tilted back like a statue frozen mid-movement, staring fixedly at the space above the door. The drizzle, blown in by the wind, dampened his graying temples and the fabric on his shoulders, unnoticed. That empty space, vacant for half a month, was now occupied by the massive, unique, strangely vibrant new sign, Time Stretched Thin. The clinic held only the soft hiss of rain on the acrylic sign and my own thunderous heartbeat. Dad's back was ramrod straight, his shoulders rigid as cast iron. I couldn't see his face, only his tightly clenched fists, knuckles white with strain, trembling slightly. A minute? 2. Longer. The silence pressed down like a growing boulder, crushing my chest, making it hard to breathe. He saw it. He must have seen the meridians, the points. That was his world, his life. Would he recognize it? Or would he see this tattoo style as another brutal invasion of his sacred space? Just as the crushing silence threatened to overwhelm me, Dad's body swayed almost imperceptibly. Still not turning, he slowly raised a hand, movement stiff and deliberate. With rough fingers he wiped his face, slowly, thoroughly. Was it rain? Or something else? I didn't know. Then, still without a word, he slowly bent down, movement stiff like a rusted puppet, and began picking up the sharp shards of the teacup, piece by piece, by hand. His fingers were nicked by the jagged edges, small beads of blood welling up and dripping onto the dark tea stain, spreading into a deeper crimson. He didn't seem to care, focused solely, silently, on gathering the fragments, as if it were the only important task in the world. I stood frozen, throat tight, unable to speak. The air smelled of faintly bitter tea, cold porcelain, and the damp earthiness from outside, a confusing, unsettling mix. The new sign hung silently outside, bringing not the expected storm, but a deeper, unnerving, boundless silence. That evening, the buzz of the community art show drifted faintly down the street. I changed into my one decent black shirt and, after much hesitation, decided to go. Dave had texted excitedly earlier, admitting he'd taken it upon himself to submit my original sign design sketches and some process drawings to the exhibition, and they'd been selected. "Pride of Ink Soul, Maya! You gotta see it hanging!" He'd written. The show was in a converted old warehouse serving as the community center. Industrial, style metal light fixtures hung from the high ceiling, casting warm yellow pools. The air hummed with the mingled scents of paint, turpentine, coffee, and chatter. Walls were covered in diverse works, abstract splashes, realistic portraits, bizarre installations. Visitors held paper cups of coffee, murmured, paused before pieces. I felt like an intruder, adrift in the crowd, eyes searching urgently. Then I saw it in a quieter corner. My design was framed simply in black wood, hanging on a pristine white exhibition wall. Orange spotlights bathed it warmly, making the indigo meridians, ochre points, and emerald vines glow with stunning clarity and power. A small metal plaque beside it read, Maya Chun, Channels, Source and Flow, with a brief description, an attempt to fuse traditional meridian aesthetics with modern tattoo art. A small group stood before it, discussing in low tones the precision of these lines. Incredible. It has scientific rigor yet artistic vitality. A scholarly-looking man in black-framed glasses mused, stroking his chin. Look at the placement of these points, anatomically perfect. Never seen TCM elements used this way, so cool. A young man in a leather jacket, his own arms adorned with ink, said admiringly, the balance of the circle and the vines is perfect. Captures that ancient, yet modern feel so accurately. A woman with long hair remarked, raising her phone to take a photo. The unfamiliar praise was a trickle of warmth, soothing my frayed nerves. I stood on the periphery, watching my work examined and discussed under professional light, a new feeling, a mix of shyness and pride stirring in my chest. Then, my peripheral vision caught an achingly familiar stooped figure. My dad. He had arrived unnoticed, standing a few paces away from my framed piece, half turned from me. He didn't move closer for a detailed look like the others. He didn't join the discussion. He just stood there, a silent silhouette, head tilted back, his gaze fixed heavily on the frame design. The bustle of the gallery, the talk of lines, color, fusion, it all seemed muffled, held at bay by an invisible barrier around him. His back seemed more bent than I remembered. His gray hair looked starkly white under the lights. He stared so intently, so long, that the group beside him changed twice. The look wasn't the shock or dead silence of the morning. It held something deeper, more complex, like examining a long, lost treasure recovered, or deciphering an ancient cryptic text written in his own blood. The lines on his face were chasms in the light. I even saw his Adam's apple bob almost imperceptibly. He didn't try to approach. He didn't look for me. He stood like that for an eternity until my legs felt stiff. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, he gave a single, very slight nod. So small it could have been a trick of the light. Next, he turned, his steps seeming heavier than when he arrived, and walked silently through the chattering crowd towards the exit. His back disappeared into the night outside. That tiny nod was like a pebble dropped into the deep well of my heart, sending violent, silent ripples outward. Was it acceptance? Resignation? Something else? Overwhelming uncertainty gripped me again. I'd practically fled the noisy gallery, my footsteps unsteady on the way home. Chinatown's neon flashed in the night. Food smells were still rich, but it all felt blurred, unreal, like looking through frosted glass. My mind replayed the silent back, the almost invisible nod, the drops of blood falling as he picked up the shards bare-handed that morning. Pushing open the clinic's back door, the familiar blend of herbs and an almost suffocating silence hit me. Only a small, dim wall lamp lit the main treatment area downstairs. Dad wasn't there. A wave of near exhaustion washed over me. I dragged my heavy feet up to the attic, wanting only to bury myself in darkness. As my key slid into the lock, the door opened from inside. Dad stood there. Only the small desk lamp lit the attic, its yellow glow barely illuminating half his face, the other half lost in deep shadow, making the lines seem even deeper. He'd changed out of his medicine-scented work shirt, wearing a washed-out, loose gray cotton pajama top. Seeing me, he seemed momentarily startled, his gaze flickering, not immediately settling into its usual sternness or avoidance. In the cramped stairwell, the air froze. We stood facing each other. Awkwardness and an unnameable tension hung thick in the dim light. I caught the faint scent of lingering moxa smoke on him, mixed with a trace of turpentine and crowd from the art show. "Back?" He finally spoke, his voice rough and dry, breaking the suffocating silence. The tone was flat, unreadable. I murmured, the sound catching in my throat. Silence again. He shifted slightly, making space for me to pass. I kept my head down, brushing past him, acutely aware of his heavy gaze on my back. I went straight to my desk, turning my back to him, pretending to tidy scattered pencils, though my fingers trembled slightly. The lamp cast my long shadow on the wall. Footsteps sounded softly behind me. Dad hadn't left. Instead, he slowly walked over to my narrow bed. The old floorboards gave a faint creak. He sat down, the mattress sinking deeply under his weight. I heard him take a deep breath, then let it out slowly, achingly long, as if expelling a lifetime's burden. The attic held only our stifled breathing. "That?" His voice came again, lower now, cautious, testing, as if afraid to disturb something fragile. "The drawing. It was good." He paused, seeming to search for words. "The lines. The points. They're correct." The words were like clumsy stones, pushed out with effort from deep in his throat. No praise, not even an evaluation. Just a statement of basic fact. But the weight behind those words made me stiffen instantly. The pencil in my hand clattered onto the desk, rolling away. I whirled around. In the dim fringe of the desk lamp's glow, Dad sat on my narrow single bed, head slightly bowed. He seemed to have summoned immense resolve. With his hands calloused, weathered hands that had handled silver needles for a lifetime, he began, clumsily, deliberately, to roll up the loose gray cotton sleeve of his left pajama arm. Slowly, solemnly, like performing a ritual, the coarse cotton was pushed up, layer by layer, revealing the arm beneath, mapped with the traces of time. The skin was loose, dotted with faint brown age spots like islands, veins standing out like dry riverbeds. It was an arm that had labored a lifetime, borne countless medicine boxes, pressed countless points, and had once burned a daughter's dreams in anger. The sleeve was rolled all the way up to his elbow. He lifted his head. In the dim light, his eyes held none of the clinic's sternness, nor the complex ambiguity of the art show. There seemed to be a murky, fiercely contained wetness glinting faintly within them, carrying a heartbreaking vulnerability that was almost pleading. He extended a slightly trembling index finger, its tip stained faintly yellow from years of handling herbs. He pointed to a spot on the exposed skin of his inner forearm, just above the wrist. The skin there was relatively smooth. His gaze traveled through the yellow lamplight and locked onto my wide, shocked eyes. His lips moved. His voice was dry as sandpaper, yet the words were clear, cutting through the stillness. "Here! Can you tattoo the Hegu point?"